Jeffrey is in Barnet. Jeffrey, what would you like to say?
I don't know that I'm answering your question directly, but I wanted to...
How dare you?
Well, I began listening after you'd done the introduction,
okay.
And you've
very
just
wise,
repeated the question.
Very wise, Jeffrey, very wise. But I'm interested to hear your contribution regardless.
So I'm a rabbi, and when I heard the subject, what came to my mind was a letter that I and 31 other rabbis, progressive rabbis, I have to admit, I think apart from one of them, signed in the Sunday Times in August, when the president of the Board of Deputies protested about the possibility of the ICC holding Netanyahu to account. The 31 rabbis, including myself, wrote against the president of the Board of Deputies, upholding international law and saying that it is only international law which we have to respect, and which was in fact, after the Holocaust, it was Jewish jurists who particularly, like René Cassin, instituted it. They were very much a part of it. So we were entirely in favour that this is the right way to proceed.
I remember that letter, actually, from August of last year, and I fear it's another example of something that hasn't received anything like the level of coverage that would have been afforded to something or someone or supportive of, more supportive of Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't know. I appreciate you haven't heard the whole programme, so feel free to decline the invitation to answer any other questions. But what do you think has happened over the course of the last year, Jeffrey? How has Israel found itself or been led by Netanyahu into this sort of situation?
I've been involved with Israel-Palestinian work since 1967. I co-chaired the Jewish Youth Emergency Committee when we feared that Israel was going to be wiped off the map.
Yes.
And it was an extremely emotional time. But from that point on, in fact, we were in touch with Consul General of Israel and went to him immediately after the Six-Day War. We had 3 huge warehouses full of blankets, medical equipment, tents, and we said, we need to distribute this now to the refugees who are not Jewish refugees, but who are Palestinian refugees. And he said, I think that's a really good idea. Come back tomorrow. I'll telegram Jerusalem. It was in the days of no internet. And we came back the next day and he said, well, I'm really sorry, but the government feels that it would be a sign that we felt guilty if we were to accept that offer.
Gosh.
From that point on, I knew that I was a rabbi and not a politician. And I've been absolutely clear that the occupation is illegal. I'm horrified about what's happening at the moment. Many of my colleagues, I'm 83, so I recognise that I'm retired and it's much easier for me than it is for a rabbi who is still trying to keep his community together, where some of them feel very much the pain, which is accurate, of the Israelis who don't get the news that we get over here. It's very censored, what they're able to see. They have to watch Al Jazeera, and I have a close colleague who's a rabbi in Israel who I talk to, so I know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
They watch Al Jazeera to know what's going on. I think that recognition of the horror of what took place on October the 7th and the recognition of the fear that has been evoked once again in the Jewish community that instead of never again, again is happening.
Yes.
And the Jewish community just feels it. It's in our bones. We're a traumatized people.
And Netanyahu has exploited that perfectly natural response?
Absolutely. Absolutely. A great big Tesco lorry. I thought I was in a quiet place as the lorry's just coming past. Maybe I can hide.
Well, in a way, Jeffrey, it's a reminder of the success of the diaspora, that enormous Tesco lorry, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'd compare the size of it is probably the size of the humanitarian trucks, which are not being allowed by the Israelis to go into Gaza.
Good Lord.
It's huge. It is absolutely huge. And it helps me to recognize the pain, the suffering. This last week, I was in a meeting with Dr. Victoria Rose, a British plastic surgeon who's been over twice to Gaza, who you could get on your program to describe the horror that she's seen there.
I'm so glad you were listening today, albeit belatedly, and I'm so grateful to you because you've articulated quite perfectly how difficult this is for somebody in your position and how much more difficult it would be if you still had a congregation, if you weren't retired. I wonder if you could help my listeners just with one final thing and just explain what you mean when you use the word progressive to describe yourself and most of the other signatories of that letter last year.
Yes, I think I can do it relatively truthfully and easily. Traditional rabbis, Orthodox rabbis, of whom the majority rabbis in Israel are Orthodox, believe that the Bible, the 5 books of Moses particularly, were given by God word by word, apart from a few little question marks raised by a 14th century Rabbi Ibn Ezra. The progressive rabbis believe that it is the best seeking by human beings, very wise, very spiritual, but the words were written down by human beings, and therefore they're not sacrosanct in the same way. We're not fundamentalists, and therefore we have to question, and we have to be open to the realities of the world in which we live.
You're right. That is a fairly helpful explanation. Jeffrey, thank you.
Well, thank you, and I'd love to speak to you again. I admire you enormously.
Well, that's incredibly kind of you. Thank you. And we will definitely talk again, and I will try and get Victoria Rose onto the programme as well.
Great. Thank you.
It's coming up to 11 o'clock. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And, just gosh.